Hi. Brenda. Good Brenda. Good puppy girl. So, I was trying to figure out what shirt to wear, and I'm like, well, I don't have anything that has an actual flamingo on it, and I don't really have that many fully pink shirts. And I'm like, none of that works. And I was pulling out a shirt, I think that had dinosaurs on it, and I'm like, wait a second. And I'm like, oh, I have this. The shirt I got from Grand Line Review the other year. Or for my birthday, or for last year for Christmas, whichever one it was. I don't remember. So I'm like, haha, I am good. I will wear that for this video. Okay. So, this is going to be the next Dressrosa royal video. Royals, rulers, leaders, that type of a thing. This one is going to be about Donquixote Doflamingo. And this is actually going to be broken into two parts. The first video is going to be from his birth up until when they attacked Dressrosa. And then the next one, which will come out next week, will be from that point onward. So, depending on how long the video is getting, I will either stop just before their plan to attack Dressrosa starts, or after he's king of Dressrosa. We'll see how that falls. Mostly because Doflamingo has a lot that happens, and there's a lot of things that he's involved in. And I didn't want to do an entire video where I just talk all about that, and it's really freaking long. Plus, if I break it up, I get two for the price of one. Also, I have other stuff I have to do today, and this makes it easier. So, in regards to Donquixote Doflamingo, he is also known as the heavenly demon, is I think the way that it's kind of referred to. He also has the code name of Joker in the underworld as an underworld broker. He mainly tends to deal in information, but of course we also know that he sells the smiles and trades with Kaido and gets weapons and so many other different things that he uses his influence for. And of course, deals with Caesar and all of that stuff. And kind of acts as like this, back door into Wano via Kaido and Orochi, so that way, the world government can sell weapons to them, or buy weapons from them, is generally how it's done. Hi, please don't lick the wall. Stop. There's no reason for you to lick the wall. I promise you that. There's nothing on the wall. So he is, of course, the older brother, the firstborn child of the Donquixote family. He is the captain of the Donquixote Pirates, the leader of the Donquixote family, as in like the crime family. He is a former member of the Seven Warlords of the Sea, or the Shichibukai, and his bounty when it was frozen was 340 million berries, which, given how long he's been a warlord, he was a warlord for about just over 10 years, because it was like 10 years ago that everything happened in Dressrosa, and he became a warlord very shortly before that, because he was waiting to become a warlord before he went after Dressrosa, so he could have some of that immunity there. We of course know that he was born in Marijois and raised there for the first several years of his life before events happened that I will get into, and so he is a former world noble. One of the few that we have seen. And he is currently 41 years old. He's 39 years old when we're introduced to him in the story for the first time, pre-time skip, when we're introduced to him. Hi. And of course, more information. He of course has the Ito no Mi, or the string devil fruit, which allows him to create and manipulate strings out of his body. It is a paramecia type devil fruit. He generally uses it to make himself, be able to move from one place to the other very easily. He also uses it to physically manipulate people with his parasite threads, that he can either do in small groups or en masse, like he does in Dressrosa. He uses it to also just fight, where he uses the strings to be able to attack. He also has the ability to make a clone of himself out of the strings, which, given the fact that the string version of him acts exactly like him, and physically looks exactly like him and everything like that, is a pretty good technique to be able to do, because like with Mr. 3, with Galdino, who can do his wax clones, they don't have any other color added to them. They're just white. And the only way that they end up getting the color added to them is if Miss Golden Week does anything to them. But they are not in the same place anymore. Also, unlike Galdino, Doflamingo's, clone, or clones, I guess. I don't know if there's an upper limit to the amount of clones he has the ability to make. We see him make one, and then that gets turned in the birdcage, and then he makes another one, and that's the one that Luffy fights. So, in order to get to Bellamy and everything like that. So, I don't know if there's an upper limit of how many clones he can make. Come on, up on the bed. Up on the bed. Come on, up. There you go. There you go. There you go, pretty girl. So, I'm not sure if there's an upper limit of the amount of clones he would be able to make. I mean, I would assume there would be, given the fact that there would only be so much string he could make, even with using his awakened ability of being able to turn the surrounding area and objects there into strings for him to be able to control. So I would assume that there is an upper limit to the amount of clones he could make for himself. And also in regards to these, we have seen that Doflamingo is very good at using his devil fruit. He also does not 100% just rely on his devil fruit. He also has all three kinds of hockey. We see him use Conqueror's hockey in his battle with Luffy. We see him use armament hockey and observation hockey at various points throughout the Dressrosa arc, which shows that he has a very good mastery of all of these different things. But he doesn't 100% rely on any one of them too much, because he does put up an exceedingly hard fight for Luffy and Law to deal with when they are dealing with them, and for Luffy in the end when he does defeat him. But that'll be more stuff that I go into in the next video. In regards to some of Doflamingo's character traits, I should say is a decent way of putting it, is when it comes to his family, when it comes to most of the rest of the world, he really does not care if anyone lives or dies or has a happy life or a sad life, beyond what type of optics he wants them to see him in and how useful they are to him in regards to his plans and machinations that he does. He is a very Machiavellian schemer in that regard. And because the thing is that, Crocodile in Alabasta is trying to pull off what Doflamingo pulled in Dressrosa, and now it's just like, yeah, no, Doflamingo pulled it off. You didn't, Sand Boy. You got close, but you didn't quite get it. You were defeated by the Rubber Boy. And later on, Doflamingo was defeated by said Rubber Boy again. By said Rubber Boy also. But Doflamingo, when it comes to how he tends to treat the people around him, is that when they are the people who are a part of the Don Quixote pirates or the Don Quixote family in this regard, he treats them fairly well. I mean, yes, he keeps kind of killing Baby Five's fiancés, but there's like a twofold thing to that. It's like, A, he keeps killing them or eliminating them and, things like that because A, he doesn't want her being taken away from the family. B, he is actually protective of her, and he doesn't want her to be with someone that is going to be somewhat, just manipulative of her the same way that he's doing. So, there's that. But we see that he is very protective of all of his, all of the suits, Trouble, Pika, Diamante, even Virgo. He's protective of Virgo. We see him be protective of Baby Five and Buffalo at various points in time when they're growing up, and even later on. Giola and Dellinger as well, and Lao G. He is even, before he knows that, Roshinate is the traitor, he is also very protective of Roshinate as well. And even for a little while with Law, when Law was part of the family, he was protective of him as well. And of course, Monette and Sugar and everything like that when it comes to them. I mean, Sugar gets a little extra protection because of the way that she is kind of like the linchpin and part of his plan to control Dressrosa. But all the rest of the family, and I think I got most of them, all the rest of the family, he does care about them, and he doesn't want to see them get hurt. Yes, if they disappoint him, he will be angry at them, but he's not going to, actually physically, necessarily harm them for the most part. He'll scold them and scare them, type of a thing, but he's still protective of them. And we see that throughout the course of the flashback that we get during the Dressrosa arc, and of course in the Dressrosa arc itself. We also see that they tend to be fairly protective of each other, and and Gladys is, I think Gladys was the one there that I missed, but all of them are protected by him very well. Even Viola, who I went over in the previous video for this, was, she becomes a member of the family in order to protect her father and her niece, so that way they are not killed by Doflamingo. And during that time frame, she is loyal to the family, and while she probably doesn't have the best relationship with Doflamingo, as is hinted at and as I went over in her video, and I will be going over later on in the other Doflamingo video that I will do for next week, is that, she does develop some types of connection to the rest of the family out of just necessity, but they're also the ones that came in and attacked her home and, led to the death of her sister and a lot of her countrymen, and led to her father's dethronement, and her niece, from that perspective, was Kyros being, turned into an orphan. So there's some back and forth there. One of the things that we get with Doflamingo is, of course, during the Marineford battle, he has this quote that basically gives us his worldview, and that's, "Pirates are evil, the Marines are righteous. These terms have always changed throughout the course of history. Kids who have never seen peace and kids who have never seen war have different values. Those who stand on the top determine what's wrong and what's right. This very place is neutral ground. Justice will prevail, you say? Of course it will. Whoever wins this war becomes justice." And that is a rather good description of Doflamingo's opinion of the world during when all chaos is breaking loose at Marineford, which I'll go into much more detail in the next video, but in the other video in part 2. But there's still a lot there with that. It's like, okay then, got a lot to do with that. There's a lot to break down there, and he's kind of not wrong. I mean, given the limited amount of communication that happens within the One Piece world, yeah, you can read about pirate attacks and things like that in the World Economic Times, but it's not quite the same as physically, being able to have some form of a connection with the people who are having these problems, which is, something that happens in our world today. So, going into Doflamingo's past. So, his childhood, as I said, he is the eldest son of Donquixote Homing and his wife. I wish we had a name for her. I've been wishing that for months now. And he is, of course, a member of the Don Quixote family, meaning he is a descendant of the Don Quixote king that became one of the founding members of the world's government way back 800 some years ago. And for the last 800 some years, that family has lived on Marie-Joie and been fairly happy until Homing came along. So Doflamingo was born 41 years ago. And one of the things, and then of course 2 years later, he gains his younger brother. He gains Rocinante as his younger brother. And Doflamingo is actually quite protective of Rocinante. We actually do see that throughout the flashback here, up until he finds out that, Rocinante is the traitor. But what ends up happening, and this was a story point I did want to point out in here because I've mentioned it in previous videos once we found out about these events. So, Doflamingo was born 41 years ago. 38 years ago was when they had the human hunting competition, or the population extermination tournament, depending on how you want to phrase it, at God Valley. And so that means that the year that Doflamingo was born, they had one of these. And that 3 years later, when he would have been 3, they had one of these again. Now, it is left up for debate whether or not they have continued the human hunting thing, or because of what happened at God Valley, they have decided that they are not going to do it for a while. and it may just be something that they just kind of stopped doing it for a while. That maybe Eam and the Gorosei maybe determined, okay, there was a few too many things that happened at the moment, and we're going to hold off on doing another one of these for a little while, so we'll wait. But had they continued doing that, then that meant that when Doflamingo would have been 3, or when he would have been 6, 3 years later after the God Valley incident 35 years ago, then there would have been another one, and he would have been old enough to then see it. The thing is that even if the one that happened at God Valley was the last one that they've done recently for the last 40 years, then that would be, Doflamingo still would have probably ended up hearing about it. Because, like, if they would have made that announcement that, like, oh no, we're not going to do this again for a little while, because of the big incident that happened at God Valley, and because of how many celestial dragons were in danger because of the Rocks pirates and the Roger pirates showing up, Doflamingo, because he was 8 when they left, so even if they had another one, he would have seen it when he was 6. And Homing does not strike me as the person that would have been involved in this, because A, he doesn't strike me as the warrior type. B, given what we see happen to him, I don't think that would have been something he would have been involved in necessarily. I can probably guarantee you that had Doflamingo been raised in Marie-Joie, like he would want to, he either would have become a member of the God's Knights, probably, or at the very least someone taking part in this competition. Given the fact that, 2 years ago, or, given the fact that in the current storyline, he basically sets up the same thing with his birdcage game at Dressrosa. Is this same concept of, like, there are the rabbits, and those are all the different starred ones that have the bounties. That's Luffy and his group, and, Law and everything there, and Viola and Riku and everything, that they all have those marks and they're worth more. And that's basically the same thing that happens on God Valley. So either Doflamingo saw one of these at one point in time, or he may have been old enough to remember some bits of what happened when that would have happened at God Valley, but probably not, because he would have only been like 3 years old, depending on what time of year it happened. But the other thing is that, okay, other celestial dragons would have talked about this. He would have learned about it from other celestial dragons. It may have been something that's taught in the celestial dragon version of elementary school and, primary school and everything like that. And he may have learned about it that way, and it's just like, this was a proud part of our history. And then a few years ago, there was an incident that happened during the last one. So the Gorosei have decided that we shall wait a little while before we do another one. And Doflamingo may have been like, well, once that's happening again, I want to be a part of that. I want to be one of those warriors. I want to be like Garling. That type of a thing. And that would have been a very interesting story plot there of like, well, what would have happened there? There's some interesting what-ifs involved in that. But, so, Doflamingo probably heard about it one way or the other, and then he designed his birdcage game in the same setup for that one. So, as I said, when he was about 8 years old, his father, Homing, Doflamingo's father, Homing, moved them from the Celestial Dragons, abdicated as a Celestial Dragon, and they all left him and his wife, and Doflamingo and Rocinante moved down to the lower realm. I don't remember if we ever get the name of the island where they lived, but they moved there, and they have this beautiful house there and everything like that. It's this beautiful mansion, and they have, whatever amount of money to live in abject luxury for the rest of their life. And then, depending on how you watch it, either in the anime, it's Homing says something stupid to the people in the town where they moved to, and basically says, yeah, hi, I'm Homing, Donquixote Homing. I am a former member of the Celestial Dragons. This is my son Dofi. I have a wife and another son named Rocinante. Back up at our very nice big mansion that you may have seen just got built up there on the hill. We're normal people now, and how can I help you, and what's the price of fish? Like, that type of thing is what happens, and either it's that happens, or in the manga, they just find out that they're former celestial dragons somewhere or another. Given the fact that the celestial dragons are very vindictive a-holes, I would not be surprised if they had sent some member of CP0 or CP whatever to go and leak that information to the people of the island that, oh, you know, that family that just moved in there, you know, all those, you know, blonde people with the snooty kid that keeps yelling at us about bowing and slaves. Yeah, they're celestial dragons. They're former celestial dragons type of a thing. And they don't have a connection to the world government anymore. So, one way or another, the people on the island found out. And that led to them, of course, attacking the house and stringing up Homing and Dofi and Roshanate, stringing them up. Dofi had his eyes supposedly, like, you know, burn marks or scratch marks or whatever around his eyes, given what we see happen. And given that we've yet to really see his eyes since then. By the way, I want a pair of Doflamingo glasses. They look awesome. I just don't know where to find a good pair. You know, so we see this happen in the flashback, and of course, the thing is that the people who are doing this, they have the right to be freaking angry and pissed off and just super vindictive about everything that was done to other people that they know who had been made slaves, their children or their spouses, or even them personally, who may have managed to either were kicked out of Marie-Joie because they were no longer interesting to the Celestial Dragons, or they managed to somehow escape Marie-Joie in some shape or form. And, you know, they were mentally and physically scarred and wounded and everything like that by what happened to them there, or by what happened to their family members. Or I think someone in the audience says, my son was taken and made into a celestial dragon slave, and at some point he made his way back to me somehow, but he was never the same. And, you know, that type of stuff. Bear in mind, this is pre-Fisher Tiger climbing the red line and freeing a bunch of the slaves and everything like that. So this is pre that happening. But one thing I would like to point out here is that we found out during Kuma's flashback that when they were managing to escape God Valley, they managed to save 500 other people. Now, those may have been some that were 500 combinations of other slaves that they were trying to escape and get them off the island, and maybe some residents of God Valley. May have been a possibility there. Admittedly, we still don't know how Shanks as a baby fits into that, but he would have been on God Valley with, you know, his father and possible mother, with Garling. But Kuma may have managed to send some of these slaves away, and they were the ones that ended up finding their way back to their homes. And while they may be free at this point in time, they still have, like, the mental and the physical scarring and injuries and everything like that, the trauma that went with being slaves. So some of those people who ended up here may be the ones who, like, knew about the Doflamingo family or the Donquixote family and everything like that. So there's, like, connections there. So all three of the guys from the Donquixote family are tortured. I don't know if we ever find out if the mom gets tortured or not. Mostly because the next thing that we know is that Dofi and Roshi spend time trying to gather any form of food that they can, and the family themselves are living in this trash squalor heap. And Homing tries to call the Otherworld nobles, and he's like, please, just, I'm sorry, I will take this punishment, I will bear this punishment, but please, my wife and my sons do not deserve what is happening to them. Please, my wife is sick. Please let them come back to Marie-Joie, let them become celestial dragons again. Just please, just take them, and I will stay here and take the punishment, because this was my stupid idea to do this. The world nobles, of course, the other world nobles, probably talking to celestial dragons in that regard. They don't want anything else to do with Doflamingo, with Homing, and they're just like, yeah, no, you left us, so no, this is your own fault. And so that just kind of breaks Homing. And then, as I said, Dofi and Roshi spend so much time trying to gather up any form of food that they can find, and then they bring it back to their mother so they can try to give her at least some form of nutritional food so she can get better from being sick. Now, unlike other random anime moms that just randomly end up getting sick, her becoming sick makes sense, because A, she is used to living in this very clean environment in Marie-Joie. And not really exposed to that many diseases, probably. She comes to this place, she gets kicked out of her nice house, and has to end up living in this trash squalor where there's probably a lot of stuff around that just scratches and stuff can end up leading to infections. And they have to live in this drafty thing that's barely a shack for them to live in. And she gets sick. And of course, we do see that Dofi adores his mother during these flashbacks, during this part of the flashback. Him and Roshi just adore their mother. We also see that they tend to get beat up upon a lot by, the people who live on the island already. By the other people who live on the island, of course, know what they are. And it's kind of more entertaining to leave these celestial dragons around to let them live in squalor than it is to make them suffer for what happened to, your family or friends or whatever, just other people you knew, or just in general. You may have no connection directly to the celestial dragons in regards to punishment or suffering in your family, but you're like, hey, I still know about a lot of it, and these kids are related to whoever did it. But that is basically the whole concept of punishing the child for the sins of the parent, which is one of the things that Oda does not condone. But unfortunately, it is something that ends up happening a lot in One Piece, and in this case, it's Dofi and Roshi, who are far too young to know that the way that they were raised initially was a bad way of being raised, and that's just what they're used to. And it's punishing them for decisions that were made long before they were born, based on their circumstances of birth. This doesn't excuse everything else Doflamingo has done, but it's okay, in the beginning, it's punishing the child for the sins of the parent. My mom and I are watching the Percy Jackson series on Netflix, on Disney Plus right now, and we're liking it. And there's a lot of the monsters attacking the children, the demigod children and stuff like that, because of the sins of their parents. And it's just the child is not responsible for the sins of the parent. Your monsters keep trying to attack them. But of course, eventually, what happens is, unfortunately, Doflamingo's mother dies, and eventually this leads to where he ends up meeting Trouble. Now, Trouble ended up witnessing when Dofi and his father and brother were being tortured, and Dofi managed to somehow awaken his Conqueror's Haki. And Trouble recognized that this was Conqueror's Haki. So he finds Dofi and he's like, okay, I know what you are. And yes, you're a celestial dragon. I really don't care about that. Or, well, that can fit into my plans better here. But you have the qualities of a king. You have, the king's Haki and everything like that. And with you leading us, we can get stronger. We can get more influential. We can get better. We can blah, 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 move up in the world. I have a devil fruit and I have a gun, and here you go. And Dofi takes the devil fruit. He takes the Ito no Mi and eats it. And ends up, gaining that power. And then he decides that he is going to go and kill his father, and then take his father's head back to Marie-Joie and try to, barter, trade, whatever, with the celestial dragons. To here, I brought you the head of the traitor. I didn't make this decision to leave. Neither did my brother. Neither did my father. Or neither did my mother. But I brought you back my father's head. Can I please come home now? Type of a thing. And that was the plan. It doesn't go very well. Dofi ends up, he does end up shooting his father. Homing does actually kind of apologize to them, to Dofi and Roshi. He's like, I'm sorry that you ended up with a father like me and everything like that, a stupid father like me and all that. So he apologizes for that, but then he gets killed by Dofi. Right in front of me, right in front of Roshi. This is about when he's 10, so for about 2 years they've been living in squalor at this point in time. And what ends up happening is, of course, Dofi then ends up taking his father's head back to Marie-Joie, and he's got Treble and Diamante and Virgo and Treble, Diamante, Virgo, what am I missing? Pika. Pika, I'm missing Pika. That all of them, he tries to get it that they can go to Marie-Joie with him, but of course the Celestial Dragons want nothing to do with it, and they just call them a family of traitors, and somehow Dofi ends up managing to escape. Now, we do know that Dofi knows information about Marie-Joie that they may not necessarily want him to know, whether that is from information that he knew from when he was a celestial dragon child, as in stuff that was taught to them. He was obviously taught about being wary of anyone with the will of D in their name, because there's a connection there and whatever, that they're seen as like the boogeymen for the celestial dragons. So there's something there, but I don't think the giant straw hat is common knowledge in the celestial dragon world. And I did have a theory at one point in time that like Homing had been being trained to become a Gorosei, or a bit of the running to become a Gorosei, but given the fact that it seems to be a lot of the celestial that the Gorosei seem to be, if not fully immortal, at least longevity, and that may not have been the case, but maybe he just had other information or something like that. Maybe his father wanted him, Dofi's grandfather maybe wanted Homing to become, you know, one of the warriors for the Gods Knights, and that just didn't happen. So that didn't go well, and Homing may have been a disappointment. We know that there's a connection to another branch of the Doflamingo of the Donquixote family where Milzigard is from, but we never know how close in relation those are. So eventually what ends up happening is after they manage to not get, after they don't manage to, you know, make their way into Marie-Joie, Dofi, Pika, Virgo, Treble, and Diamante all end up forming basically the Donquixote Pirates with Dofi as the lead. And eventually what ends up happening is, you know, they end up trying to, basically they end up making horrible names for themselves, in the fact that anyone that is disrespectful to Dofi ends up getting beat up upon by one of the other four, and basically gets to the point where anyone in the areas where they live end up within the North Blue where they live, that knows who they are, end up just becoming terrified of them, and basically end up, you know, bowing to him the way that they, bowing to him the way that he would be bowed to if he was a celestial dragon, and everything like that. So they worked through that. Dofi during this time frame also would have been reading about the rise of, you know, Roger, with Gold D Roger. If there's anyone else that would have caught on to that before they changed it to Gold Roger, it would have been Dofi. Watching him as his rise through piracy and fame and everything like that, and eventually becoming the Pirate King. During this time frame, Dofi is building up his network. He's, just going after anyone that has offended him in the slightest manner and just torturing them. He's building up other members of the Doflamingo of the Donquixote Pirates. He's, Senor Pink is brought in here. I think I forgot to mention earlier, Lao G, Giola, all of them are eventually brought in what is going on and brought into the family at varying points. I don't know if we ever get the exact order that they joined, but given their ages, you can kind of guess. Well, we know when Baby Five and Buffalo and Law and Monette and Sugar joined, and then Dellinger is just taken in as a baby by Giola, so that's there. But what ends up happening is, of course, the family have their devotion to Dofi, and eventually, he's built all of this up and everything like that. And at age 17, he manages to make his way to Logtown, where he is there during the execution of Goldie Roger, and he is there at the birth of the great age of piracy and everything. He's like smiling as all of this is going on. Sometime after that, he ends up finding Rocinante again. Now, back when they were children, back after he killed their father, Rocinante just kind of left, and I don't blame him. You just watched your brother assassinate your father and then take his head to go and try to hand it back into, the place where you came from that abandoned you guys. So, yeah, I don't blame Roshi for leaving. Now, he's been off being raised basically by Sengoku and trained to be a Marine and everything like that. When about 14 years after he's been gone, when Dofi is 24, Roshinate shows back up, and he basically ends up refusing to speak. And Dofi is like, "Oh, this is because of the trauma that they had when they were kids and everything like that." So he goes with it and everything like that. And we see very quickly that Dofi becomes again very protective of Roshinate. He does not like it when Roshinate gets hurt. And of course, he brings him back into the family. At this point in time, Virgo has gone off to enlist in the Marines and to basically become his, we get flops here where, like, Roshinate is the Marine undercover in the Donquixote Pirates, but they don't know that. And then Virgo is now the undercover Donquixote Pirate in the Marines. Again, they don't know that. Neither organization is aware of this. And where where Virgo stays in the Marines for the next 15 years and eventually becomes, a vice admiral and everything like that. And then Roshinate becomes Corazon, takes on that mantle of, like, the heart, suit and everything like that Dofi has with his, poker, with his card game themed setup. So that's that way. Eventually we get to about 25 years ago, where we are introduced in the flashback to Law. Now, by this point in time, they have set up their headquarters at Spider Miles, and they do still live in, like, a junk yard there, but they at least seem to have somewhat decent accommodations to live in, and I would assume they have some form of a deal with the town that's nearby or something like that, since we see them in the town a lot. The town probably doesn't have, like, marine protection, so they probably pay the Donquixote Pirates for, like, protection if anybody shows up or whatever. But we are, of course, fully introduced to the setup where when Law shows up, we see the whole family there eating, and Law does end up getting invited to become a member of the family. And Law, of course, shows up with bombs and is threatening to blow himself up because he's just like, screw it. He's gone Joker. Basically, he's like, society doesn't accept me the way I am because of this stupid disease and everything like that, and I'm just going to blow everything up and blah, 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 blah. And Duffy's like, I can use this kid. And he brings Law in and makes Law one of the, join as, like, one of the junior pirates along Baby 5 and Doflamingo and everything like that. So Baby 5 and Buffalo, excuse me. So they start all, training and growing up and everything like that. And for the most part, Doflamingo is basically able to just, say when it comes to the Amber Lead syndrome that Law has, he's like, that whole thing about how it's spread is a lie. And Law's like, yeah, no, it's a lie. I could touch all of you and you would be fine. This Amber Lead syndrome is from stuff that is in my blood that cannot be passed on to someone except genetically via exposure to this stuff. I know there's come up with a theory recently that, like, maybe Saturn was involved in this somehow in the creation of the Amber Lead syndrome or the White Lead syndrome and everything like that. And I'm like, given what we know about the sapphire scales, I wouldn't be surprised by that if that was the case. Kind of hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised by it. But that would make Law exceedingly angry and be like, okay, I have a new focus for my anger. I'm going to go kill the spider cow demon. Just go after that. Just make Law angry. So eventually what ends up happening is, of course, as we watch this in the flashback, Law grows up within the family for, I don't think he's there a whole year before everything happens, but he's there for a little while before Roshinate finds out that Law is a member of the Will of D. And then he ends up taking Law and basically telling Dofi that he's just like, I'm going to take Law around the North Blue a bunch and see if we can try to find a doctor that'll treat him. This, of course, leads to Roshinate having to commit arson at various hospitals because the doctors are stupid. Leads to that. And, of course, while this is going on, Doflamingo actually ends up having, like, flashbacks because he is aware of what happened at Flevens via his, like, intelligence network and everything like that. He's aware of the fact that the people in Flevens were innocent, but they were still slaughtered because of decisions made by people above them that they had no choice in the matter. And he just sees a lot of this connection between himself and Law in regards to the fact that Law is persecuted because of this, because of decisions made by people outside of his own influence. And Doflamingo was kind of the same way when he was a kid, is that, like, he was punished for stuff that he had no say in the matter of at that point in time, at that age. And so we see that connection there between the two of them. We also see Dofi and Roshi end up having like some form of a decent, relationship between the two of them. It's just that, Roshinate is a spy, and eventually it's like, yeah, no, he's a spy. And then Dofi finds out. And that doesn't end well. And I'll be getting to that in a moment. But what ends up happening is, of course, Law and Roshinate travel around, and eventually, they end up, they build a very good relationship with each other and everything like that. And eventually this ends up being that Dofi calls them and says, okay, we have found the information about the thing that we have been looking for that should be able to help, should be able to help Law. And he ends up explaining, okay, we found out that there's this devil fruit called the Op no Mi, and that it is available to be sold by the Barrels Pirates, and they are going to be on Minion Island. And here's the date for the purchase and everything like that. It's supposed to be the Marines trying to purchase the Op no Mi from them for, I think it was it 500 million berries? 5 billion? I don't remember what the exact number is, but it was just like over this exceedingly high number of how many berries this devil fruit was going to cost. And they're like, this is the type of devil fruit that is, can be used to cure anything. So if we get a hold of it, then we can cure Law. And of course, Dofi's plan is that he is going to get the devil fruit, give it to Roshinate, who he does not know has a devil fruit, give it to Roshinate, and then Roshinate can, heal Law. But then because Dofi has tried to instill this loyalty in, Roshinate to him, that he will then basically convince Roshinate to use the Op no Mi to then give Dofi the, perennial life surgery, the immortal surgery, the eternal youth surgery, whatever the case is. Whatever it's called, depending on the translation. And then that would kill Roshi, but it would help make Dofi live longer, I guess is his opinion. And, what ends up happening from there is, of course, it does lead to where, Roshinate does manage to get the Op no Mi from the, Barrels Pirates, and he manages to get it to, Law and feed it to him and everything like that. And what ends up happening is, of course, while all of this is going, Law, what ends up happening is, of course, the Don Quixote pirates show up. They make their way to Minion Island, which is where the Barrel Pirates are, where they're residing. And they end up basically slaughtering all of the Barrels Pirates. And nobody makes it out of this except for Law, who, of course, hides in the chest and ends up managing to escape later on. And Drake, who, of course, ends up managing to escape and hide on the Marine ships and manages to get out before Dofi sets up his, first kind of version of the birdcage around the island to prevent anyone from leaving the island. And of course, what ends up happening is they get to the island, and he's, dealing with all of the Barrels Pirates and everything like that, and finds out that no, someone else showed up and they already took the Op no Mi. So he's like, okay, I guess I have to go deal with this. And then, of course, while Roshi and Law are trying to escape, Law ends up running into Virgo. And of course, Virgo ends up putting two and two together and figuring out that Roshi is the traitor and everything like that. And then he ends up getting in contact with Dofi and telling Dofi that, his brother is the traitor, which of course leads to the confrontation where Dofi and Roshinate finally have this confrontation after Roshinate has managed to, give Law the devil fruit and put Law in the treasure chest to keep Law safe with the quiet force field around him, so Law can't won't be heard regardless of what happens. And of course, this finally leads to the confrontation of Doflamingo and Roshinate, where it's finally everything kind of bubbles to the surface, where Dofi is just like, you have betrayed me, you were my brother, and I brought you back into this family, and I gave you this position of power, and I trusted you, and all of this other stuff. And he's just like, why do my family members keep making me kill them? It's just like, Your father didn't make you kill him. Roshi is not trying to make you kill him either. You have the ability to choose the right path in this regard, you idiot. You self-entitled idiot. And of course, what ends up happening is, Roshi kind of he's more just trying to act as a distraction than anything. And, he does kind of confront his brother, and he's just like, how would you expect me to respect you for everything that you've done and everything like that? All you've done is cause pain and harm and everything like that. And of course, this does lead to when, Dofi is just like, I knew that there was someone in our family that was a traitor. I was just hoping it wasn't my own brother. And then he kills Roshinate. And of course, this ends up leading to where there's also the revealing that, like, Roshinate has a devil fruit to Dofi, so he's just like, you couldn't have fed me the Op no Mi anyway because I already have a devil fruit, so that wouldn't have done anything. I would have died in the process, and you would have lost your shot there, given the information that they had about devil fruits at that point in time. That if you eat more than one, you explode, I guess, was the concept that they had. And this, of course, leads to Doflamingo, executing Roshinate, and then he ends up getting information from Baby 5 and Buffalo that says, oh, there's a boy that made his way onto one of the Marine ships, and, they assume that that's Law. It's actually Drake, but this, of course, leads to where, they're getting ready to leave, and they end up, Dofi has killed Roshinate, and they take the treasure chest that has Law in it along with the rest of their bounty that they pulled from the Barrels pirates, and they're leaving. And eventually this leads to where, of course, Law manages to escape and head off on his own and everything like that, and does make himself better, and of course leads into everything else with Law's backstory. And of course, as the Donquixote pirates are leaving Minion Island, that area in the North Blue, they end up being chased by Suru, who, of course, we kind of find out that, like, Suru and Doflamingo have kind of this rivalry the way, not quite the same way that, like, Garp and Roger had a rivalry, because Garp and Roger both knew that, like, Garp knew that Roger was not a bad pirate, whereas Suru knows that Doflamingo is a bad pirate. He is the bad kind of pirate, and she has seen that multiple times, given probably what she's come across after trying to deal with him and capture him at various points in time. And so we get a lot of that, and so she's been chasing him for years and years and years, trying to capture him and bring him in and everything like that. And he's even admitted that she is a very formidable opponent for him to deal with, and has been for quite a while. There was one other little bit that I wanted to point out here, and then this is going to be where the video ends, and then I will do the takeover at Dressrosa all the way up to current events in the second video. Because I've been going at this for almost 50 minutes now, and I got a little bits that I got to cut out. But what ends up happening is, and this is a non-canon thing, but I just like to point it out here because it is kind of an interesting that makes sense, is that the way that they work this in is that non-canonically, the tie-in that they have with Film Gold is that the Doflamingo family were going to sell the Goro no Mi, or the Goru no Mi, the gold fruit, and that ends up getting taken by Gil Tesoro, and that's what ends up happening there, and that's that connection into Film Gold. And eventually, at some point in time, they do try to kill him to get it back or to stop him from eating it, but that fails. So there's that. But that's what I wanted to point out there. And then, of course, the next bit that I will be going over is, of course, in the first part that I'll go over in the next video for this will be the takeover of Dressrosa all the way through current events. So that's what I have for this video. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!